The alarm klaxons of the crystalline spire tore through the silence of the upper atmosphere. A harsh, dissonant screech that shattered the usual tranquility of the royal district. This wasn't a drill. It wasn't a diplomatic arrival. It was a code obsidian. The princess was gone. High Inquisitor Thrax paced the gleaming obsidian floor of the royal bridal suite, his four multifaceted eyes twitching with a mixture of panic and rage. His chitinous armor clicked against the floor, a sound that usually terrified subordinates. But today, the terror was entirely his. In 3 hours, the Grand Union was supposed to take place. Princess Elara, the jewel of the Xyrian Empire, possessing the purest psionic bloodline in 10 generations, was to marry High Exarch Vorian. It was a union meant to solidify military control over the entire sector, and the bride was missing. Check the perimeter again. Thrax roared, his voice modulating between high and low frequencies. She cannot have simply evaporated. The palace shields are impenetrable. Sir! A trembling guard stepped forward, holding a scanning device that emitted a soft blue light. We picked up a biosignature. It's faint. It's coming from the lower maintenance hangars. The lower hangars, Thrax spat, that is the domain of waste management and freelance transport scum. Why would her radiance be there? The signature is stable, sir, but it is in close proximity to a Class C heat source and a registered Terran vessel. Thrax froze, a Terran. Humans, the cockroaches of the galaxy. They were everywhere, piloting the ships no one else would touch, eating things that would kill a Xyrian, and surviving environments that would shatter a crystalline life form. If a human had taken the princess, this wasn't just a kidnapping. It was an act of war. Squadron Alpha, with me, Thrax commanded, drawing his pulse spear. We descend. If a single hair on her head is damaged, I will burn that hangar to ash. 300 levels down, the atmosphere was different. It didn't smell of ozone and sterilized air like the spire. It smelled of hydraulic fluid, ozone, and something else. Something rich, oily, and inexplicably warm. The ship sat in Bay 94 like a bruised fist. It was a modified heavy freighter, the Iron Mulligan. It wasn't elegant. It didn't have the flowing lines of a Xyrian cruiser or the biological curves of a hive ship. It was a block of dark gray metal, scarred by micrometeoroids and blaster fire, held together by welds that looked like surgical scars. Inside the cockpit, the air recyclers were working overtime to filter out the scent of melted cheese and spicy pepperoni. Ronin leaned back in the pilot's seat, his boots propped up on the console, right next to the flashing check engine light that he had covered with a piece of black tape 3 systems ago. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and then left out in a sandstorm. His jaw was covered in a rough stubble that hid a few faint scars, and his eyes were the color of cold steel, though currently they held a look of amused softness. You're going to get grease on that dress, Ronin warned, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the small cabin. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, a seat designed for a heavy-set cargo hauler, not a waif-like alien royalty, was Princess Elara. She was breathtaking in a way that defied human aesthetics. Her skin was a pale, luminescent lavender that seemed to shimmer when she moved. Her hair was a cascade of living silver strands that floated slightly in the zero-gravity field she generated subconsciously. She was wearing a wedding gown woven from photonic thread, worth more than Ronin's ship and his life combined. And she was currently holding a slice of pepperoni pizza with 2 hands, looking at it as if it were a sacred artifact. It is hot, Elara whispered. Her voice was like wind chimes, melodic and multitonal. Why is your food always so dangerously hot, Ronin? Because cold pizza is for breakfast, princess. Hot pizza is for lunch. It's a rule. Ronin took a bite of his own slice, ignoring the string of cheese that threatened to fall onto his flight suit. You know they're probably tearing the palace apart looking for you right now. Elara took a hesitant bite. Her large violet eyes widened as the flavors hit her tongue. Salt, fat, acid, heat. To a Xyrian, whose diet consisted of nutrient pastes and flavorless energy crystals, human food was in sensory overload. It was chaotic. It was violent. It was wonderful. Let them look, she said, swallowing with a satisfied hum. She slumped back into the worn leather seat, the tension that usually held her spine rigid finally dissolving. For 20 cycles I have been prepped, polished, and programmed. Stand here, Elara. Do not speak, Elara. Marry the exarch who smells like antiseptic and death, Elara. She looked at Ronin, her gaze intense. This This grease-laden circle is the first real thing I have experienced in months. Ronin chuckled, reaching over to wipe a smudge of tomato sauce from her cheek with his thumb. The contact made her flinch, not out of fear, but out of shock. Xerians were cold-blooded. Their environments were kept at a brisk, near-freezing temperature. Ronin's skin was radiating heat like a furnace. "You're burning," she murmured, leaning into his hand instead of pulling away. "Humans run so hot. Ideally, yeah. If I go cold, you've got bigger problems," Ronin joked, though his eyes lingered on hers. He had met her 3 months ago. A standard cargo run to the Royal Spire, delivering rare off-world heavy metals for their shield generators. She had slipped away from her guards to look at his ship. She had been fascinated by the mess, the noise, the inefficiency of it all. They had talked for an hour before the guards found her. Since then, whenever he docked, she found a way to slip away. He knew it was dangerous. He knew a freelance pilot named Ronin had no business even looking at a high princess, let alone sharing a deep dish supreme with her hours before her wedding. But when she had shown up at his airlock 20 minutes ago, tears of liquid mercury streaming down her face, asking for sanctuary, he hadn't hesitated. "So," Ronin said, dropping the humor, "Vorian, the wedding is in 2 hours. You really not going?" Elara shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. The photonic dress flickered. "Vorian does not want a wife. He wants my genetic code. The psi index of my lineage allows control over the automated dreadnought fleets. Once we are bonded, he controls the military. He will purge the outer colonies. He has said as much in private." Ronin's jaw tightened. "So it's a coup with a veil." "Yes." She looked at him, her violet eyes swimming with fear. "I cannot go back, Ronin, but I have nowhere to go. The Empire spans 3 sectors. He will find me." Ronin swung his legs down from the console and spun his chair to face her. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, "And this ship has a modified slip-space drive that isn't on any official registry. I can outrun a groom with a bad haircut." Elara managed a weak smile. "You would become a fugitive for me? You are a mercenary, Ronin." "Where is the Prophet?" "The Prophet," Ronin said softly, "is in the pizza. I can't let a customer eat alone." Before she could respond, the ship's proximity sensors screamed. Red lights bathed the cockpit, drowning out the cozy warmth. "Warning! Class A breaching signature detected. Exterior hangar door override initiated." Ronin cursed, his hands flying across the dashboard. "They found us faster than I thought." "It is Thrax," Elara whispered, terror seizing her voice. "He is the royal hunter." "Hold on!" Ronin barked, flicking switches. The Iron Mulligan's engines roared to life, a deep guttural thrum that shook the deck plates. "Buckle up, Princess. We're skipping the reception." The hangar doors didn't open. They exploded inward. High Inquisitor Thrax and a squad of elite Xerian shock troopers stormed through the smoke, weapons raised. But they were expecting a grounded ship. What they got was the rear thrusters of a Terran freighter, firing at 40% capacity directly into their faces. The shockwave knocked the troopers flat. Ronin slammed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, scraping its belly against the deck before lifting off. "Shields up!" Ronin shouted over the roar of the engines. "Shields holding at 80%. Elara responded instantly. She didn't cower. She didn't scream. Her fingers, long and delicate, were dancing over the co-pilot console. She was interfacing with the ship's computer psionically. Ronin glanced at her in surprise. "You know how to operate a Vanguard-class kinetic deflector?" "I am reading the manual," she said, her eyes glowing with a soft white light. "Directly from the ship's memory core. It is remarkably simple logic. Barbaric, but simple." "I'll take barbaric," Ronin grunted, banking the ship hard to the left to avoid a turret emplacement. They shot out of the lower hangar and into the bright violet sky of Xylos. But they weren't free. As they broke the atmosphere, the sky turned dark, not with space, but with metal, a blockade. High Exarch Vorian's personal fleet was waiting. 3 heavy cruisers and a swarm of interceptor drones formed a net around the planet. "Attention, unidentified Terran vessel!" A voice boomed over the comms, cold and dripping with disdain. It was Vorian. "You are in possession of stolen Imperial property. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. If you resist, you will be vaporized." Ronin flipped the comm switch. "Hey, Vorian. Sorry about the invite, but the bride's got cold feet. And I'm fresh out of party favors." "Ronin!" Elara hissed. "Do not antagonize him." "Antagonizing is part of the strategy, Princess. Makes them emotional. Emotional pilots make mistakes. They are drones, she countered. They do not have emotions. Right, good point. Ronin gritted his teeth as the radar lit up with incoming missiles. Hang on! The Iron Mulligan spun into a barrel roll, dispensing flares. The missiles detonated harmlessly behind them, rocking the ship. Ronin flew with a style that was uniquely human. Instinctive, aggressive, and slightly insane. Xerian pilots relied on calculated trajectories and computer-assisted paths. Ronin flew by the seat of his pants. He dove into the debris field of a destroyed satellite, using the junk as cover. We cannot break the blockade, Elara said, her voice straining as she held the shields together with her mind. The cruiser Vengeance is locking its main ion cannon on us. One hit, and our hull integrity fails. Ronin looked at the tactical map. She was right. They were boxed in. He needed a miracle or a distraction. He looked at Elara. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was glowing brighter, her connection to the ship deepening. The interface lights on the dashboard were turning from amber to violet. Elara, Ronin said, his voice steady. Can you amplify the ship's comm signal? Broadcast on all frequencies. Yes, she said, confused. But calling for help is useless. I'm not calling for help. Ronin smirked. I'm calling the wedding off psionically. Elara's eyes went wide. You want me to project? You said your bloodline controls the fleet, right? Well, let's see if Vorian's fleet listens to the rightful heir or the usurper. It requires touch, she said quickly. I need a conduit. The ship's systems are not organic enough. Ronin grabbed her hand. The sensation was electric. For Elara, it was like touching a star. The heat of his body, the chaotic, fierce biological energy of a human, rushed into her. It grounded her. It gave her raw power. For Ronin, it felt like plunging his hand into a glacial river. Cold, but clarifying. He felt her mind touch his. Fear, duty, and beneath it all, a burning desire to be free. Do it, Ronin commanded. Elara closed her eyes. She squeezed Ronin's hand, anchoring herself to his warmth. She reached out with her mind, through the ship's amplifier, and pushed. She didn't just broadcast a voice, she broadcast a feeling. For a split second, every sentient being in orbit, every pilot, every drone controller, even Vorian himself, felt what she felt. They felt the cold, suffocating grip of Vorian's ambition. They felt the terror of the arranged marriage. And then, they felt the pizza. They felt the warmth of the Iron Mulligan. The safety, the simple, chaotic joy of freedom. The feeling of Ronin's hand holding hers. The ion cannon on the Vengeance powered down. The drone swarm faltered, their formation breaking as the psionic feedback looped their logic circuits. Now! Ronin slammed the throttle to max. Jump drive engaged! The Iron Mulligan surged forward, slipping through the gap in the confused blockade. The stars elongated into streaks of light. The G-force pressed them into their seats. But Ronin didn't let go of her hand. They dropped out of slip space 3 hours later, in the quiet darkness of the nebula of lost souls. It was a pirate haven, filled with ionization gas that messed with long-range scanners. They were safe, for now. The silence in the cockpit was heavy, but comfortable. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion. Elara slowly released Ronin's hand. She looked at her palm, then at his. The difference in size, in texture, in temperature was stark. Yet they fit. You neutralized a blockade, Ronin said, breaking the silence. With a feeling! I shared my truth, Elara said softly. Her bioluminescence dimmed to a gentle, sleepy glow. And I borrowed your strength, your stubbornness. Is that a human trait? Being too stubborn to die? It's practically our primary export. Ronin stood up, stretching his back. Bones popping. That, and questionable culinary choices. He walked to the small galley in the back of the cockpit and pulled 2 bottles of water and a box of slightly cold leftovers. He returned and sat on the edge of the console, facing her. So, Ronin said, handing her a bottle. You're a fugitive now. Vorian will spin this. He'll say I kidnapped you. He'll put a bounty on my head that could buy a moon. I'm sorry, Elara looked down. I have ruined your life. Ruined? Princess, before today, my schedule for the week was hauling fertilizer to a farming colony and fixing a leaky waste pipe. Being the galaxy's most wanted couple is a definite upgrade. Elara looked up, a spark of hope in her eyes. Couple? Ronin paused. The word hung in the air. He looked at this alien royalty, this creature of light and crystal who had just mind-blasted a dreadnought for him. He looked at the pizza sauce still faintly visible on the corner of her mouth. Partner, Ronin corrected, though his voice was softer than usual. Partners in crime, for now. Elara smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. It wasn't a polite court smile. It was real. I suppose I will need training, if I am to be a partner. Lesson 1. Ronin opened the box. Cold pizza, try it. She took a slice. She took a bite. She chewed thoughtfully. It is chewier, she observed, but the flavor profile has matured. See, you're learning already. Poke. Weeks later, the news feeds across the sector were chaotic. High Exarch Vorian had declared martial law, claiming the princess had been mentally compromised by a rogue Terran terrorist. But the underground channels told a different story. Footage had leaked, not of the battle, but of the feeling Elara had projected. It had started a movement. The warmth, they called it. Colonies on the fringe, tired of the cold, rigid rule of the Empire, were beginning to rebel. They were painting crude symbols of pizzas and human hands on their walls. On the Iron Mulligan, things were changing too. The spare cabin had been converted into Elara's quarters. Though she spent most of her time in the cockpit, she had discarded the wedding dress for one of Ronin's oversized flight suits, rolling up the sleeves and cinching the waist with a utility belt. She looked ridiculous. Ronin thought she looked perfect. They were currently docked at a shadow port on Omega 4, refueling and picking up supplies. Pass me the hydro spanner, Ronin called out from underneath the engine manifold. The 12mm or the 14mm, Elara asked, her voice echoing from above. The one that fits, Princess, just guess! A tool clattered onto the deck next to him. It was the right one. I sensed your frustration geometry, she said smugly, leaning over the railing. You require the 14mm. Ronin slid out from under the engine, wiping grease on a rag. He looked up at her. She was glowing again, a soft, happy pink. You know, for a runaway royal, you're becoming a decent mechanic, Ronin admitted. I have an excellent teacher, she replied. She floated down, landing softly beside him. The air in the engine room changed when she was close. It felt charged. Ronin, she said, her tone turning serious. We cannot run forever. Vorian is burning the outer rim systems looking for us. Innocent people are suffering. I know, Ronin sighed, tossing the rag aside. We need to strike back, but we're one ship against an armada. We are not just one ship, she stepped closer, daring to place her hand on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel the heavy, rhythmic thud of the human organ. It fascinated her. We are a symbol, and I have been analyzing the ship's logs. You have contacts, the Ronin's raiders, a mercenary guild? Ronin laughed, a dry, barking sound. That was a long time ago. A lot of burned bridges. Bridges can be rebuilt, she insisted, especially if you offer them something they cannot refuse. And what's that? Legitimacy, Elara said, her eyes flashing silver. I am the Empress by blood. If they fight for me, they are not pirates. They are the Royal Guard. Ronin stared at her. The timid girl who had cried over pizza was gone. In her place was a queen who was learning to fight dirty. You want to start a civil war? Ronin said. I want to end one. But I need my pilot. She looked up at him, vulnerability cracking through her resolve. I need you to fly me into the fire, Ronin. One more time. Ronin looked at her hand on his chest. He covered it with his own. The heat transfer was instantaneous, a loop of energy that felt stronger every day. Fly you into the fire? Ronin grinned, a dangerous wolfish grin. Princess, I'll fly you to the gates of hell if you promise to buy dinner after. Pizza? She asked. Is there anything else? The plan was madness. It relied on three things: Elara's psionic ability to jam sensors, Ronin's ability to fly through an asteroid field at Mach 10, and a ragtag fleet of mercenaries, smugglers, and disgruntled miners following their lead. They jumped into the capital system not quietly, but with all guns blazing. Target the flagship! Ronin yelled, the Iron Mulligan vibrating as energy beams slashed past the cockpit. Elara, get me a line to Vorion! Shields failing, Elara shouted, her hands pressed against the console, her mind acting as the ship's secondary generator. I am holding the hull together with thought, Ronin. Do not get us hit! I'm trying! This bucket moves like a brick. The comms crackled open. Vorion's face appeared, twisted in fury. You filthy ape! You dare return? Return! Ronin laughed, banking the ship hard to dodge a plasma torpedo. We're here for the eviction, Vorion, and I brought friends. Behind the Iron Mulligan, dozens of ships dropped out of warp. They were ugly, they were mismatched, but they were armed. Fire at will, Ronin commanded. As the battle raged, the Iron Mulligan wove through the chaos like a needle. They were aiming for the spire. Elara needed to get to the throne room to interface with the planetary core and override Vorion's command codes. I need to get closer. Elara grit her teeth, sweat a human-like reaction she was picking up. Beating on her forehead. 50 kilometers! I can get you to 10, Ronin growled, pushing the engines past the red line. But we're gonna have to crash. Crash? Controlled crash! Mostly! Trust me! I trust you! She screamed, and she did, in that moment, surrounded by death and vacuum. She trusted this human more than she had ever trusted her own kin. The ship slammed into the landing bay of the Spire, metal shrieking, sparks showering like fireworks. They skidded to a halt, the airlock blowing open instantly. Ronin stumbled out, coughing smoke, his kinetic rifle raised. Clear! Move! Elara followed, glowing so bright, she was hard to look at. She wasn't just a princess anymore, she was a star. They fought their way to the throne room. Ronin took the guards, using dirty fighting tactics. Kneecaps, elbows, flashbangs. Elara took the heavy weapon troopers, flinging them aside with waves of psionic force. When they kicked open the doors to the throne room, Vorian was waiting. He held a disruptor pistol aimed at Elara. It ends here, Vorian sneered. The bloodline ends. The Empire becomes pure order. He fired. Ronin didn't think. He didn't calculate. He moved. He threw himself in front of Elara. The disruptor blast hit Ronin's chest plate. It melted the armor, burning into flesh. He hit the ground hard. No! Elara's scream wasn't sound. It was a psychic shockwave. The windows of the spire shattered. Vorian was thrown backward, pinning him against the throne. Elara stepped over Ronin's fallen body, her eyes burning white. She didn't use a weapon. She walked up to Vorian, placed a hand on his forehead, and showed him. She showed him the vast, infinite emptiness of his own soul, compared to the burning, chaotic warmth of the human who had just saved her. Vorian's mind snapped. He slumped to the floor, catatonic. Elara dropped to her knees beside Ronin. The smell of burnt ozone and seared flesh was overwhelming. She placed her hands on his chest. Ronin, she sobbed, do not be cold. Please, do not be cold. She poured everything she had into him, every ounce of psionic energy. She tried to restart his heart with her mind. She tried to warm him. You promised, she whispered. Dinner! Ronin coughed. It was a wet, ragged sound, but it was the best sound she had ever heard. He opened one eye. It was hazy, but focused on her. Extra cheese, he wheezed. Elara laughed, a sound that broke into a sob. She collapsed onto his chest, burying her face in his neck, not caring about the blood or the dirt. She held him, and for the first time in the history of the Empire, the Empress cried human tears. 3 months later, the coronation of Empress Elara was unique. For one, the dress code was casual formal. For another, the consort stood by her side, not in ceremonial robes, but in a repaired, polished flight suit with a new medal pinned to the chest. The Empire was changing. The warmth movement had led to treaties with Terran alliances. Humans were no longer cockroaches, they were catalysts. Ronin leaned against the railing of the royal balcony, looking out at the cheering crowds. His chest still ached when it rained, and he had a nasty scar that Elara liked to trace when they were alone. But he was alive. They are cheering for you, Ronin said. They are cheering for us, Elara corrected, stepping up beside him. She slipped her hand into his. Her skin was still cool, but not cold. She had adapted. Or maybe he had just warmed her up. So, Ronin asked, Empress stuff all day. Decrease tax laws? Until sunset, she nodded. And then? And then, Ronin grinned, pulling a small, flat box from behind the railing. I found a place in the lower district that makes deep dish. Elara's eyes lit up. With the spicy circles? With the spicy circles. He kissed her forehead, and the crowd below roared. It wasn't a traditional royal kiss. It was simple, it was warm, it was real. As they turned back to the palace, leaving the cheers behind, Ronin looked at the camera. Or rather, looked at the horizon where the stars waited. It's a big galaxy out there, he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Find your warmth and hold on to it. He winked. The door slid shut, and the Iron Mulligan could be seen in the distance, revving its engines for the next diplomatic mission, or maybe just a pizza run.